Now, for more on the crash and the impact this might have, I'm joined by Seth Kaplan. He's the managing director at Airline Weekly. Seth, good to see you again. Unfortunately, we see you in some very trying circumstances. Let me ask you about this. This was brought up in the newsroom earlier about protocol for safety. A lot of people are criticizing, why are these flights flying over these conflict zones to begin with? And I know the answer is they've done this in the past, but help our audience understand what's going on here.
Yeah, a lot of science, Phil, but also some art to doing this. You know, there had been various advisories by authorities like the FAA suggesting that airlines not fly over that territory. Now, specifically, there was believed to be more danger below 32,000 feet, this plane flying at 33,000 feet. Also, my understanding that there was some bad weather along the usual route that forced this aircraft to divert a bit from where it perhaps hoped to be. So, you know, while certainly these are very legitimate questions, you know, we also can imagine being a pilot trying to balance all of those various concerns, the weather, which of course can cause safety issues, alongside, well, what we now know was very much a real danger.
Seth, we've got announcements from various airlines that they are saying that they are now going to advise their pilots and basically say, we're not going to go down this route. But I want to ask you, who's responsible ultimately for these routes? Is it the pilot, or does the airline decide what route you're going to fly?
Excellent question, Phil. Yeah, pilots certainly have discretion. I mean, they're in charge of, very literally, the captain aboard an aircraft. But yes, these routes are planned nowadays with computerized equipment that takes into account lots of different factors, everything from wind to economics. You know, sometimes it's cheaper to fly one way than another. Obviously, airlines don't compromise safety for that, but if two routes are nearly as safe, well, they'll kind of do it's cheaper. I mean, it all comes into play. But then when things happen along the route, whether it's weather or some other consideration, ultimately the captain makes his decision.
You know, you think about the impact of the airline industry, and of course that is a conflicted area. And I guess my concern is that until the conflict is resolved, the risk is going to be there. How can the airlines reduce that risk, and how they can comfort passengers to say that, look, safety first and not economics?
Yeah, excellent question, and especially an airline like Malaysia Airlines, which, although we don't yet know, and there's certainly no specific indication that this had anything to do with economics, you know, clearly an airline that is indeed struggling financially. After MH17, people were asking, you know, why didn't they subscribe to all the data services that might have helped locate the aircraft? Was that because they were already struggling financially before that? And of course, all the more so now after not one, but these two tragedies. But they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to acknowledge the problems. You know, there's nothing you can say to people to get them to forget what happened.
Seth, it's not the first time that airplanes fly over conflicted areas. And my understanding is that there is a special beacon that the aircraft sends out to notify everybody on the ground that this aircraft is not a military aircraft. Share with us how the aircrafts identify themselves.
Yeah, in various ways. You know, first of all, using something that we learned a whole lot about just a few months ago, transponders, something that everybody in the industry is familiar with, but I think now most viewers as well. As we know with MH370, you know, what happened there was that the transponder, by all appearances, had been turned off on purpose. In this case, no indication that that was the case. So that is the first indication. You have this transponder primarily, along with those other satellite communications equipment that you would have aboard a wide-body aircraft like a 777 that flies over water and so forth, although in this case over land. But those systems would have been functioning as well.
Is there usually communications with the pilot when you're flying over foreign land? Do they announce to say, look, this is flight MH17, I'm flying over your airspace? Is there that level of communications, or it's relatively quiet?
Absolutely. You know, you're generally, and certainly when you're over land, you're in somebody's control. And in fact, a minute ago when we talked about the captain being in control, I should emphasize it's not that he just makes decisions without the help of air traffic control. He very much does, or she. So yes, the captain would have said hello to the air traffic regime. Again, when we think about 370, what happened there was the captain never said hello to Thailand, and that was one of the early indications that things were wrong. So So yes, there's certainly no indication here that the aircraft, that the crew were not doing what they should have done to make themselves known to be a commercial airliner, although obviously so much yet to be known.
We have time for one more question, and there's certainly a lot of questions that we won't get the answers to anytime soon. So we're gonna have to be patient on this. But what's the greatest question on your mind that you think in the next 12 to 24 hours will help you paint a perhaps more clearer picture as to what happened?
Well, of course, you just have the national security questions that are, who fired the apparent missile. But I do want to know more about the decision to fly where this aircraft flew, because we had some conflicting signals. You had KLM, whose code, by the way, was on this aircraft, very quickly come out and say, we avoid that area. So I am curious to know if in fact what this airliner was doing was all that different from what others were doing on that day, given the weather and so forth, or whether it was rather standard and just terrible luck that it's once again this airline involved in this.
Seth Kaplan, it's good to see you. I'm sure we'll be talking again in the coming days. Thank you.